Recording in progress. We've just been chatting away, and finally I'm like, okay, Lauren, we just need to get this conversation on so that people can hear it. So I'm here with Lauren Andrews, and I'm so glad that we finally connected after trying to make this happen during the holidays, which it was just way too busy.
Yes, thank you, Whitney. I'm really happy to talk to you, and I love following your page and more so your personal story too, and how you're inviting other mothers into this journey of the successes and the lows of what it's like to be an athlete and a mother at the same time.
Thank you so much. And thank you for you're are you a writer? Do you write?
No, I'm
You're a
not, but
beautiful
thank
writer.
you.
I love
Oh, that's
following
so
your
kind.
Instagram, and your Why I Run that you allowed me to share a
Uh,
few weeks ago was so
yeah,
poetic.
yeah.
So if you're listening to this, go
Aw.
check that out. So we were just chatting about how I guess we'll just dive right in. We were talking about being injured. I just came out of an injury or am coming out of injury, and you just learned that you have a bone injury, right?
hmm
And
Yeah, I mean, I can share more about it. So I am now about 20 months, almost 20 months postpartum with my first child. I had a very difficult pregnancy postpartum experience, physically and emotionally, but physically, I was not able to run from about 16 weeks pregnant to 5 months or so postpartum. I did quite a bit of strength and cross training during that time. I took up Nordic skiing. I did a lot of uphill hiking. So I wasn't necessarily weak or inactive during that period, but I certainly wasn't getting any of the running impact that I, for years prior, had been doing. Came out of that, and after my birth, it became very clear that I would end up needing a surgery to help correct some of the pelvic floor trauma from just a very difficult
oh,
vaginal birth. And so I'm in Vancouver, BC, so up in Canada, you're on a wait list. So I sort of knew that I would be on a wait list for what I was told at the time was a year.
oh wow.
So I know. So I did my best to try to get back to running, but I was still experiencing quite severe issues. And this was, of course, with a significant amount of pelvic floor PT and rehab and every other tool for any woman that's experienced issues like this. A pessary and the whole 9 yards. And
Oh
still, it was
wow.
very clear that I needed surgery. It was very, very, very uncomfortable to run, especially downhill. It felt like things were just like falling out of me. It
Oh
was
my
really
goodness.
awful. And there's a lot of emotional, not shame. I knew cognitively I shouldn't have shame over it, but I think when you feel like that, there is a bit of shame in a sense of like, what happened to my body. Like it's destroyed, but no one can see that. It's not like I'm walking around with a cast on my leg, right?
Right.
And so I ended up getting the surgery. I was back to some running before that and kind of kept it at like a low burner level, got the surgery. The rehab from that wasn't bad. It was 6 weeks off of any sort of impact activity. Came back from that, started lifting weights again. I do quite a bit of weightlifting as support for my running, and then came back over the summer of this last summer, 2023. So the surgery was in March. So by the time the
Oh,
summer hits,
okay.
I actually PB'd a 10K in a race, not wearing a watch, and had built up quite a bit of fitness doing, funny enough, a lot of like stroller 5K races with my
Oh,
son, who
really?
is about 10 or 11 months old. So I was doing a lot of fun 5K races with the stroller, hopping into friends' workouts, surprised myself with a small, but, at least it was a PB in the 10K. Then I started to get little niggles, like I got IT band syndrome and plantar and sort of a bunch of very like what I would classify as like typical runner's injuries that I
Hmm.
got when I first took up running, in more of a structured sense way back in 2016, 2017 was when I transitioned from like a very, very casual jogger who jogged, 2 or 3 times a week to more structured training. And at that time, I got lots of sort of typical runner's injuries. And then my body became more resilient over the years. And then it was as if I like backtracked to that, but my fitness was still high, right? So my sort of structure of my body just couldn't like handle the
Hmm.
running that I wanted to do and that the fitness was absorbing. So, rehabbed a few little niggle type of injuries. It would be like 3 weeks off here, 2 weeks off there, on repeat until the early fall. And then finally got about 3.5 months worth of progressively, you know, I suppose like more and more training. I started working with a coach again. He coaches a wide variety of athletes from Cam Levins to like recreational athletes. So he knows his stuff. And I think what was going on was I was absorbing the workouts. I wasn't having soft tissue issues. One thing, by the way, I did do, thinking that it would help me prevent bone injuries because they are so prevalent in postpartum women, was I waited until I had my menstrual cycle back without being
Hmm.
on hormonal contraceptives, just to ensure that my cycle was regular and the hormones were all healthy. I thought on paper I was checking the boxes. Like I thought that, well, my mileage was going up. I thought that I was eating well. My periods were every 28 days. If a doctor were to like, blood work, even when I got the stress fracture, it came back healthy. Like there's nothing on paper like high iron, good vitamin D, high bone density, blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah. But what I wasn't getting was very rarely a full night's sleep, right?
Yes.
And I think I underestimated as well the load, like the energy requirements, the biomechanical strain on like how much time a new mom spends on her feet. So I'd be running, upwards of 70 or 80 miles. I'm converting this from kilometers a week and doing
That was
workouts.
an impressive conversion, by the way.
And then coming home, and if I wasn't working, I was like on my feet caring for my son, right? Or you'd be
Yeah.
on your feet for 2 or 3 hours in the morning before you even get out the door for a run, right?
Yeah.
Whereas before, yes, you have your job and you have housework and cooking, but it's definitely not nearly as much time on your feet.
No. And you can like relax whenever you want to, and you could sleep
Totally.
usually
Like you can like
however long you
lie on the
want
couch.
to.
Like just lying on the couch for 20 minutes, like you don't have that choice as easily when you have, especially a child in that kind of under two, like it's hard for them to play independently yet. And
Oh,
like they're
yes.
constantly climbing up on things now. And it's like danger zone, even though
Uh-huh.
everything's childproof, right? So part of it is just, I think my fitness was increasing and I had a great workout. It was New Year's Eve. I ran with a friend and honestly, like I knew at that point that my fitness was probably surpassing where it had been pre-pregnancy. So
Oh,
I was getting
wow.
to a point where I was like about to run a few races this winter and probably would have PB'd the 10 and a half, which is the distances I was going to do. And then on the cool down jog, I could feel my foot felt very off. Like I just knew, for anyone listening, I think if you've had in particular a bone injury, pretty soon, like you can tell yourself it might not be that, but I think for myself, I knew enough to know like this is not soft tissue, right? The way it feels when I run.
Like
And
just very,
so
very acute or
very like it was a little sore the week of, which was probably like a reaction forming. And then the workout I did probably tipped the scales. And by New Year's Eve night, it was just like throbbing in pain and it
oh, it
hurt
was
to put
throbbing.
close to
Okay.
the
So
foot.
that's kind
Yeah.
of the telltale sign
That's
versus
a telltale. And I mean, if I had known the signs of a stress reaction, I probably could have stopped and avoided the fracture. But
Mhm.
it honestly, the stress reaction, if that even was it prior, it felt more like almost like you had like a joint off in your foot or like something was just a little bit off and maybe you needed to roll your foot or
Yeah.
nothing felt like sharp. And it was for sure something I could easily run through like a 1 or 2 out of 10 level of pain.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, so now I have what was very luckily quickly diagnosed as a second metatarsal stress fracture, proximal, which unfortunately is a higher risk site. And my sports med doctor works with a lot of runners up here, and she was very nice to see me pretty early on, and has said like as a new mom, like the sleep component is critical, right? Like
Oh,
if you're
yeah.
not getting full night sleeps most nights you can do everything else right, and it's still, if you're training at a level that I was training at, which is another piece, like I think if I had been running 30 miles a week, I don't think this would have happened, right? But
Right.
once you get back to a certain level of performance oriented training, it's something is going to give, right? And so that was my lesson of, not just the running, to be honest. It was like over the holidays, no childcare, parties, standing on your feet a lot more. Like it's never just one factor, right?
There's so many
So,
variable, like that was what kicked off my injury cycle was in 2019 when I went from running like 50 miles a week to 100 miles a week that summer. And I was working full time from home and I had 2 young kids and my son was not sleeping through the night at all. And like, I ignored all the signs. Like I
mm,
thought, I was like, I was able to do it. I was still exhausted and like fighting the urge to be like, just go on your iPad so I can take a nap almost every day that
mhm,
summer, I remember. But like, I was like, but I can do this. I can do this. I can handle this. And then I just broke. And
yeah.
in retrospect, like it's hard to not, as you would say, like feel shame or beat myself up that I didn't see the signs that I was just completely depleted. But like sleep, I mean, I've done interviews on it in my Passionate Runner podcast and for my site. Like sleep is, I mean, there are studies that show that sleep can help you prevent injuries because I mean, that is when your body recovers. And it's the like interrupted sleep that's really problematic because if you are not getting that full sleep cycle, you're not secreting all those like growth
Hmm.
hormones that you need in order to repair the work that you did the day before. So,
That's exactly how she explained it. It was like I would be waking up, you know, unfortunately when he wakes up, which is like 2 in the morning, 4 in the morning, when you're really meant to be in like your deepest sleep still, right? And then you're up for an hour or potentially more, sometimes less, but then you have to restart that whole sleep cycle again,
yes.
right? And I think, kind of zooming out on this, both with this injury and this injury, to be honest, like I was, of course, heartbroken the first 48 hours, cried a lot, couldn't even cross train. I was really upset. And now, you just take it one day at a time, like any other challenge in life. And I know hopefully by the spring or late spring, early summer, I'll be fully back looking at goals. I'm supposed to run Chicago Marathon. So like
Oh,
it's
great.
not a life and death thing. It's not it postpones everything that I was doing, but I will eventually make my way back and I'll be wiser and hopefully stronger for it. But I think there's an element of, and social media is a big, big part of this, and the running media is we celebrate, rightfully so, these mothers who have these incredible comebacks after having kids. And
Hmm.
for whatever reason, circumstantial, maybe an easier pregnancy, childbirth, maybe they have more family support, maybe who knows? There's a million reasons. Luck, you just don't know. Above and beyond just perseverance. And I think I went into pregnancy really. When I first got pregnant, I was still pretty actively training with running. And I kind of read these stories and saw these posts. And I thought, well, if all it is a matter of being proactive, I'll start pelvic floor, physio at 16 weeks pregnant, and I'll make sure that I don't have issues when I give birth. And that certainly did not go as planned. Or, I'll make sure that I wait till I get my menstrual cycle back and eat well. And that will certainly prevent me from, a bone stress injury. And that also didn't go to plan. And I don't
Yeah.
want to sound pessimistic because I'm still really glad I did those things because at least I know right now my body is actually quite healthy. And it's just a case of simple, like, hey, you just weren't getting enough sleep, right? And I can work on
Hmm.
that. My husband now kind of has realized, like, he's being way better and like helping with those night wakes too. And I want to
Hmm.
give him credit. But I think as women in particular, we both see these accounts of women who are like, sort of these all in mothers who are almost just co-sleeping with their babies every night and like all in always with their kids. And then we see these amazing women, a lot of them are pro runners, but not all, who have these, within a year, they're PBing races or making the Olympics or whatever it is. And we see all of this and it's like we're trying to mesh it all together. And I think
Yeah.
we only see the pieces that people want to show, right? So like
Oh, yeah.
like it's like we have this expectation of like you can do it all, you can do that, oh yeah, and you can also have a job and you can also have a
I
social
know.
life.
I wish there was a way that we could shed light on the whole picture because I don't know. It's like I had a conversation with an athlete of mine the other day about this. Like, even if I don't know, like I wanted to go for the OTQ, and they dropped the standard, and I
Mm,
was like, well, that's it. Um, and I was like, but even if I was genetically inclined to be able to run a 2:37, I don't I would not sacrifice the time. Like, you have to make sacrifices. You can't have it all. You cannot do it all. I wish there was a way that we could show that, but like the time it takes to train to run at that
Mhm.
level, it is, I mean, it is your job, like, and then some, and it's like the whole family has to be in it. We don't show that. And yeah, and like on social media, we often just make it looks like it's easy for everyone. It's like,
Mhm.
oh, I ran 24 miles with 12 miles at race pace. And then I came in, I was baking cookies for my family. And like, I was not tired at all. And, maybe some people are like that, but I don't, I don't
And
think
like when you
that's
were running those
reality.
20, totally. And like when you were doing those 24 miles and like potentially driving to a location to do that and driving back, like who, like there's clearly someone with your children. Obviously, I think the husband and wife should, especially on the weekends or whenever both parties are not working, like essentially 50-50 share the load. But like what was going on for us is we were 50-50 sharing the load. And so I would go out, say on a Sunday morning, get my workout in, maybe pick up some groceries on the way home, do an errand or two, come back. The minute I'm in the door, it's like trade-off time, right?
Oh
And my
yeah,
husband's
you're
like, okay,
back
my
in it.
turn, I'm leaving.
Yeah, no,
Right?
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's
And
or if you're not doing the 50-50, and this was like for me, I had guilt with the amount of training that I was doing because I was running so much that I would try to do it early in the morning.
mm,
I did not want to have to lean on other people. And then there comes the sleep component. It's like
yes,
not only is your sleep truncated, but you're not sleeping enough because you're waking up at 3:30 a.m. to go
get
run.
in and yeah.
I don't know. I just yeah, I wish there was a way that we could be more real than showing the highlight reel. I just think it's so hard though, because it's also like you don't want to sound like a Debbie Downer either. And
Totally.
and people don't want to say like, yeah, I ran 24 miles and I didn't spend half the day with my kids. And then when they did see him, I was exhausted and cranky because 24
That
miles.
is
You know what I mean? Like,
so like the day of my injury, you know, or not the day of my injury, but like most Sundays for me would be like a long run workout or a long run of some sort. And then often just the way the rec centers are here, he has swimming lessons Sunday afternoon. So it's like you're going to swimming lessons just like exhausted, right? And you're like
yes.
in the pool with them, like, okay, you can do this, and like changing them. And like when they're really young still, it's like full out hands on, right? Like you're just like, that's one 40-minute swimming lesson feels like another long run, like,
Yeah.
and I think that's the thing is before I had kids, and I know everyone says this, before I had kids, I did not realize, I only saw in parenting what I saw outside. The eldest sister, eldest cousin, I didn't have extended family yet that had young kids. So I really hadn't seen the realities. I had some close friends with kids, but I hadn't seen the realities of what it's like. And I had no one in my life who was I will just say a highly dedicated, no matter if you're recreational or elite, whatever, let's not classify it with words,
Yeah.
highly dedicated athlete and also a mother, right? Like I didn't
Right.
know anyone personally who did that yet very well. And so I wasn't seeing, I think the biggest piece, which is what it's like when you're at home and your kids, clawing on your knees as you're just trying to make some food to eat and you end up eating 2 of your 3 meals a day like standing up kind of thing,
Right. Oh
right?
yeah.
And I just didn't realize like what the reality was going to look like for me, right? Like I remember I had the Run Fast Eat Slow cookbook or whatever, and like I would make
Yeah.
these superhero muffins, and now I'm like I just like was getting the food in me, and even
Right.
that,
Yes. It's like I
just
don't have time for
wasn't
that.
doesn't you don't have time for that, right? And I think so yeah, I think like kind of zooming out, the reason I was willing to share about it is it sucks, obviously. No one wants to say they're part of the statistics. Like, I don't want to admit that now I am part of the, group of women who have a bone stress injury their first 2 years postpartum. And
Mhm.
I did not think I would be, frankly. I did not think I was high risk. I have high bone density, blah, blah, blah. But I think to a degree, um, you know, people may look at, oh, well, did you increase your mileage too quickly? And that could be a
Yeah.
factor. I'm not going to lie. Like I was starting to do double runs, but I also know that I could have handled that before children, right?
Right.
So it's never just one factor. And I think as a mother runner,
Mhm.
looking at how we adapt to training and how we absorb training is never something that your Garmin can calculate in this case,
Oh
right?
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
well, the Garmin, I wish I could turn all those features off, actually. Just I just need like a Casio watch now. I'm like, just tell me how long I ran for.
Yes.
Um, yeah, I think you're so right. Like, first of all, as we sum this up, like, I think you definitely learn at least one valuable training lesson with each injury. Like for you, it's okay, sleep is important, and I need to pay attention to that and adjust my training accordingly if I'm not getting it. Um, and then we learn a whole bunch of like beautiful gifts. At least for me, it's like every time I've gotten injured, I am that much more grateful for the ability to run no matter what. But then also
Hmm.
I think it helps my relationship with running be healthier.
Hmm.
Like have it be in its rightful place instead of having it be all about the time on the clock, etc.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I think, I don't know, I had another thought and it's gone, but like
I think
right.
like one last thought I have too around injury or any time off running is like I've had injuries before. I had to take the year off for pregnancy and postpartum, and I've had 6 months off for a bad knee injury and stuff like that. And I remember feeling a lot more emotionally down for a longer duration of time during those injuries. And I think it's because the blessing is, well, in some ways, being a mother is like partly the root cause of why maybe we have a lot of these injuries. The
Mhm.
irony is that it actually being a mother also makes it easier to handle it emotionally. Like it really matures us, puts it in perspective. I know people that miss one run and they're discombobulated about that,
Yes.
right? And it really forces us to put our relationship with running in a healthier perspective. And our kids don't care if we're running or not. Our kids care if we're able to sit down in the living room and play with them or give them a hug or read them a book, right? And
Mhm.
I think it does help us remember that we are people that love and are loved for so many more reasons than just running,
Oh,
right? That's not
totally.
any of the reason.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah. And as you said in your post for me, like running, what it does for us, I mean, it means to us changes, it evolves with their life, and it definitely goes through a huge evolution as to like you really run for yourself
Yeah.
when you become a mom. Like it's for you, it's to make you better. And yes, like your kids will absorb it, but they don't love you because you run, you know.
No, like it's good role modeling, but at the end of the day, especially when you can't run, like know that your purpose in so many other realms of life, not just being a mother, is still there and valid. And I
Yes.
think for me, like it makes it a lot easier with that. It relieves the emotional turbulence and it makes it ironically easier to just be like, okay, I'm going to cross train on the bike today. One thing I can do today, I'm going to do my strength work today or whatever it is. And it makes it less burdensome to even cross train because it's like, okay, I'm going to just go get my workout in and then I'm going to go back to my other tasks I have at hand. Right.
Yes.
And it sort of simplifies it.
It does. Yeah. I know a lot of people have talked about how it it makes you way more time efficient because it's like you
Yes.
try to it's definitely quality over quantity. Well, this has been great. I have so many things I could talk to you about, so
Mhm.
maybe we'll have to do this again.
Yeah, I love that.
Well,
Thank
thank you
you,
so much.
Whitney.
Happy healing. Please keep
Thank
us
you.
updated on how you're doing, and thanks for sharing your lessons. I think a lot of lessons about sleep, but also just like bone injuries in general. I knock on wood, have only really had soft tissue injury. So that's like the whole throbbing aspect is kind of new to me. So thank you for sharing that.
No, my pleasure. Yeah, I think it really can happen. I think predominantly it can happen to people that inadvertently or perhaps struggle with the fueling piece, but I think especially for new moms, like especially if you breastfeed, but even just growing a baby and the sleep deprivation, like it can kind of happen to anyone. So I hope
Yeah.
this helps someone who might be kind of on the edge, wondering maybe I need to take a recovery week. Because ironically, my recovery week was supposed to be the following week after it happened too. So
Oh.
if you're in doubt, rest now, especially if you're not getting enough sleep.
Yeah, yes, or maybe even like a more frequent recovery week, like down like
Yes,
the third
that will
week
be one
instead of
thing we
fourth
do
week.
differently going forward too.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
good. Oh,
Yeah.
great.
Oh, I have a
See,
whole
another
list of
lesson learned.
things. Yeah.
All right, Lauren, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of
Thank
your day.
you. You too. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.